Yes. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Slate. I am Adam Kaufman. Now, normally for what has just been dubbed, and I love it, the Sports Equinox, the sports slate version, because as you know, this show comes at you 5 days a week, but this version we get into a little bit of everything here on Thursdays. Typically, Reed T. Fowler is with me. He is not. We have Matt Meiselman, who is just as well versed in everything, maybe better, actually. Come the end of the show, we may just say, you know what? Forget him. We don't need Reed anymore, Matt.
Yeah, it's his loss anyway, because this is maybe the most exciting sports day of the year. Got some chaotic games to look at, but everything's happening. So, yeah, I don't know what Reed's doing not being here.
You know what it is? I think he looked ahead to the Thursday night football game that we'll talk about and said, no, I have to hold my nose and talk about that game the whole time. I'm not coming. We will obviously get into Denver and Cleveland here in a matter of moments. We'll talk a little NBA. It's a short slate, just a few games tonight. Could dive into some baseball when all is said and done, even a little bit of hockey if we want to. Like I said, we're here with you until about 6 o'clock Eastern time. Load up the YouTube with questions, Twitter, whatever you got. But I got to begin just with this, because it's not something that directly impacts your lineup building or anything like that for tonight, or gambling or whatever it may be. Nothing that you have to hone in on this evening, but it's just so juicy, I can't ignore it. And that is what is going on right now with the Philadelphia 76ers, of course, in this Ben Simmons saga, because Daryl Morey, who, as we know, is in charge over there, he's the head of, whatever his exact title, GM, president of basketball operations, chief, whatever, I don't know. He is in charge. That is what I know, Matt. And the comments that he is giving in a radio interview right now about this Simmons situation, who, of course, as we know, was suspended for the opener. It was a blowout win of New Orleans. And, there have been questions as to whether he's going to play in that next game. Daryl Morey, reading from Twitter here, doubling down on not trading Simmons for role players. People should buckle in. This is going to go for a long time. If we can trade Ben Simmons for a difference maker, we will do it. I'm focused on winning a title. I'll go through mud, muck, barbed wire. We'll go through whatever it takes. What we're doing right now gives us the best chance to win a title. And then here is my favorite. I laughed out loud when I read this the first time. You're going to think I'm kidding. I'm not. This could take 4 years. We're in the prime of Joel's career. This is not a day-to-day issue. Every day we are going to expect Ben Simmons will be here, or we will trade him for a difference maker. This could take 4 years. This guy is
what does he mean? I can't figure out what that means.
$30+ million a year.
So they can just keep him on the roster and he won't play?
They'll spend him like crazy. I mean, he won't get all that money, obviously, if he's unavailable or refuses to play. Here's what it is. Somebody, Matt, is going to have to bend. Someone's going to have to bend. Either Daryl Morey is going to see how toxic this is. You've already got Joel Embiid obviously saying, like, I don't even care about that man. I haven't talked to him since he came back. I'm not paid enough to babysit. Either he's going to see how toxic this is, and he will just take whatever package he can get to unload Ben Simmons, even if he's got to eat a little bit of the money in the process, or Ben Simmons is going to have to say, he's just going to have to wrap his mind around playing for this team again and recouping his trade value, because right now it's so negligible because he is such damaged goods with regard to just how people, I think, are viewing him as a person, never mind what they already thought of him after the last playoff series last year as a player. Someone is going to have to cave. There's going to have to be some sort of a meeting in the middle here, because otherwise this might take 4 years if both sides want to dig in that long.
This is a wild situation. Well, for one, Joel Embiid is definitely paid enough to babysit. He makes plenty of money. I feel like he could add that into his list.
I pay my babysitter like $20 an hour. What is he talking about? He's paid plenty.
Yeah, I have no idea. And Ben Simmons is probably easy to take care of. So that, I don't think he should be saying stuff like that. No, I think Simmons eventually has to play for Philly. Like, I don't know that they're going to be able to get enough value for him because he's tanking his own trade value. The Sixers are, I guess not purposefully, but all of this is hurting their ability to trade him because all of these issues are it's hurting their leverage in the situation where, like, the rest of the league knows that they want to trade him. So maybe eventually they just figure it out and he ends up playing for the Sixers and the Sixers end up, I don't know, maybe a run to the finals this year. Like, I think from a betting perspective, this could turn into a buy low at a certain point, if people start souring on this team. Like, I personally think Ben Simmons is a really good basketball player. And if he improves his jump shot just like a little bit, like he's not going to be an MVP level player, but like he's a legitimate all-star maybe already. But if he gets a little bit better at shooting, like that could be a massive difference in the way teams have to defend him. So it's not like he's not a good player because he didn't play well in the playoffs, which he certainly didn't. Like he had some moments in the playoffs last year where he looked bad. Mm-hmm. But like the idea that they're going to be able to flip him for, I don't know, a package that gets them Damian Lillard, like at this point, that's probably
Lillard would have to demand his way out of Portland. Right. And even then, I got to think somebody would offer the Blazers a better package than Ben Simmons, given obviously what his salary is. I mean, I think the most, and I don't even think it's going to happen, but I think the most realistic trade scenario is the one that everybody's been talking about, which is basically swapping damaged goods. Ben Simmons goes to Brooklyn, Kyrie Irving goes to Philadelphia. You know, that would seem like, again, I don't believe it'll happen, but that would seem like the most realistic situation where the only way Daryl Morey is getting, you know, another star, which is effectively what he's looking for here because he doesn't want role players. He wants another star. He wants another high price guy to match with Embiid and the rest of that core. The only way you're going to achieve that, the only way any team in its right mind is going to do that is if you have another combustible situation on your hands. It's the only way that happens, which obviously is what the Nets have in a totally different way.
Yeah, I mean, that trade would be really nice for the Sixers, at least in terms of their chances to win this year. Kyrie Irving's probably a better player than Simmons, although they're both great. Like, I think that both teams would do well if that was the swap. So that would be interesting. Normally, like, it takes until the trade deadline before, like, at least for me personally, before I'm monitoring team news to try to find sports betting edges. But like, we're already there because we already have turmoil at the very beginning of the season. So like something could break, who knows when. Maybe it takes 4 years, but maybe it takes 4 days and some massive blockbuster trade happens where like the Sixers bring in someone really good or they announce Simmons is going to be on the court and like then they become an undervalued team in the Eastern Conference. So maybe this has just become more exhausting if you're someone who's looking to make some sort of betting opportunity out of this, that you just have to keep paying attention. And normally you can wait till the second half of the season. This year, that's not the case.
Well, you mentioned betting. Let's talk betting. We have just a 3-game slate available on the NBA tonight. The Sixers are not part of it, and nor the Nets. If you want to, you know, link up the potential Kyrie Irving story there either, not that he's playing anytime soon. So the games that you have, earliest one begins in, let us see, a little less than 2 hours. We got a couple games at, let me see. How did I get locked into tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't know what happened on the screen there.
Yeah, just have Bucks on me. I was looking at today's games, and then it was tomorrow's games.
Did 2 games just go off the board?
Yeah, it was weird, right? They just, yeah, 2 of them just vanished. Well, all right. At the moment, the only one that you can bet on in the DraftKings Sportsbook, at least for the time being, is Milwaukee and Miami, which is at 8:10 Eastern time. I have to imagine the other 2 games are going to come on back, and we'll be able to look at lines and spreads and what's available to you in terms of live betting and whatnot. And we're not even live, but it feels like that the way they disappeared. But Heat 2.5 point favorites, of course, against Milwaukee and the defending champs there. Giannis, who was just phenomenal there in that first game of the season, reminding everyone just how good he is. Not that anybody, I don't think, forgot over the course of that shortened off season. And all these games, you know, similar lines, similar over-unders when the other ones show up, presumably all in the, you know, kind of mid 220 range. Is there a particular game that you were or are thinking about targeting from a betting perspective tonight?
Yeah, so on the season preview show, I guess opening night show that we did a couple days ago, I was talking about how it was difficult to pinpoint what to like in the Lakers-Warriors game, because to me, those are the 2 most overrated teams in the NBA. So tonight is the first opportunity where one of those teams plays and they're not against each other. I think the Clippers getting 3.5 points against the Warriors is a value. And I think we may see this as the season unfolds, that the Warriors just aren't as good as people think they're supposed to be. To me, it's really just like they have Steph Curry, who's great, Draymond Green, who's good, and no one else who's really that good of a player on the roster. And then for tomorrow, like the Lakers open as 3.5 point favorites at home against the Suns. This was earlier today. That line has moved 2.5 points already. The Suns are only +1. So like that's an indication that the market is reacting very fast after the Lakers struggled on opening night against the Warriors. Okay, good. So now we can talk about these games too, because they're back on the screen. The other thing that's interesting, so I mentioned Clippers plus 3.5. The other thing that's interesting today is that the Heat were actually plus 2.5 against the Bucks this morning. This line has moved 5 points already because Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday are out. So I was on the sweat earlier today, and this can probably segue into DFS. And I was basically saying like, oh, there's not much value tonight. It's going to be pretty hard to like jam in all the good players, like all the high price studs, because there just aren't cheap guys that are that appealing. And then literally within 30 seconds of us being done with the segment, the announcement came that Holiday and Lopez are out. So now we're going to have like this is Jordan Noir night now. He's going to be the top owned player in DFS. But I do think this line, just to like tie back to betting for a second, I do think this line movement is correct. Like the Heat deserve to be favored in this game. It might seem a little weird, but like Milwaukee's missing Lopez, Holiday, and then also Portis and DiVincenzo are out. They haven't played yet this year either. So like this team has no depth right now. Jordan Noir was not in this rotation last year during the playoffs and their run to the finals. He played basically only garbage time, and now he's like their fourth or fifth scoring option, maybe even their third scoring option. Like a lot has changed very quickly. So like the Heat, who have a really deep roster, I think, are the better team, at least for tonight. And 2.5 might even still be too low for this game.
You mentioned it, the studs that are available tonight. And for a short slate, you've got quite a few notable guys. Obviously, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, you got Steph Curry, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Trae Young. If you want to include Bam Adebayo in that group, you can. But, those are your top players. And as you said, so much value is opened up here for the Bucks. And we'll give you some of the better value plays tonight that you can consider as well. So how many of those studs are you looking to wedge into a lineup?
So it depends. If you're playing a cash game, like you can fit 3 of them. Mm-hmm. It's just like there's enough cheap guys now with Noir, and then you have Zubac at 5,000. Grayson Allen is cheaper than that. And I'm sure there's a bunch more guys that I can name. Like it's just, if you take a look at some of the prices between 3 and 5K, like there are just players who are playing minutes that you can use to fit Giannis, Curry, Trae Young, Doncic. Not all 4 of them, but probably 3 of them. So it's a tough thing for tournaments. The contrarian move, you could argue on the one hand, it's like just play different players at those price tiers. So like play Paul George instead of Giannis, and play Isaiah Hartenstein he's the Clippers backup center now. He's close to min price. Just play him instead of Noir. But I think that you're sacrificing so much. Like those guys have probably so much lower projected points across the industry that it might make more sense to just try to make a balanced lineup where most people are not doing that. So the guy that I mentioned this morning that I think like could be the focal point in getting unique in tournaments, and he's not an off the board name. It's Kyle Lowry in his debut for the Heat. He's on a team where like I think Bam is maybe the highest owned center, and Jimmy Butler at small forward is probably going to be one of the more popular plays there because his price is a little bit cheaper. So just as you're pulling it up, like Butler's only 8,300, and compared to like this 9,000 to 10,000 range, he's a value compared to those guys. But you have Lowry in the 8,000s, and like I don't think anyone's playing Kyle Lowry tonight because he just doesn't fit basically what I was describing as like the easy to build lineup where you have a lot of expensive guys and a lot of cheap guys. So Lowry might be my favorite player on this slate, even though I think he most likely doesn't make it into the winning lineup, just because if he does, no one will have it. So it's really like the super contrarian strategy. But the last point on this is if Lowry does well, it likely means that Butler and Bam don't do as well because all 3 of those guys are actually ball dominant players, right? Like Bam facilitates the offense in a way that I don't know, like who else plays? Is his most comparable player in the NBA Nikola Jokic? Like who else does what Bam does, being like sort of the point forward? So yeah, I just don't think anyone plays Lowry, and he has the opportunity to kind of just take away from those other players on his team.
I was just looking around at some of the value options that are available tonight and ownership projections and that type of thing. And everyone looks in different places. Like Jordan Noir is obviously he's your top value. You talked about him. He's $3,700. His ownership projection though is damn near 60%. This guy is going to be cash games, tournaments, whatever. He's going to be.
I think he'll be more like in most. That number sounds low to me.
Yeah, it's nuts. And honestly, Giannis as a result of not having other studs around him, like he could be 50% owned. George Hill could be in a third of lineups or 40% of lineups. Like all of these guys, reasonably you could make the case are going to be exceedingly chalky. And obviously that's going to open up other studs like we talked about. Steph Curry's going to be a chalky guy. Bam, like you said, is going to be a chalky guy. These guys are projected to have bigger nights. Some of the available value, and Bam, even at his price at $7,600, is a good value guy, projected for in the neighborhood of 40, 45 points. Easily could do better than that. Isaiah Hartenstein is a good value play. Hill, we mentioned. Jimmy Butler, you could make a case for even at $8,300. List goes on. You want to pay down. Jalen Brunson could be a good pay down option for Dallas. Let's see, Dwight Powell. You could make a case for
Powell
him
and Brunson, those Dallas guys too. Like those were going to be the chalk value plays this morning. Now it's obviously shifted a bit, but they're still going to get some attention.
Mm-hmm. So it's even with a 3-game slate, we could see a decent amount of differentiation tonight. What's interesting in terms of, sort of fading studs, or I'm just taking a look. Like Paul George doesn't seem like a guy who's going to be particularly highly owned tonight. Trae Young, same story. Another guy who's obviously pricey and capable of having a breakout night. I think that, and don't get me wrong, like they'll be owned, they'll be represented, but compared to the likes of Giannis, of Curry, of Bam, even of Luka, I think we're going to see a lot less tonight of guys like George and Young.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I like Lowry so much too, though, is because like you have the point guard tab selected, and Doncic, Curry, and Trae are all point guard only. So like you would imagine that most people play 2 of those guys, or at least one of them, right? And like playing anyone else that isn't those 3 names is going to be way off the board. But if you just think about the way this lineup would fit together, like if I mention Clint Capella, Kyle Lowry, Draymond Green, Kristaps Porzingis, John Collins, like those aren't bad. Those are good basketball players. And if you make a lineup that just has a bunch of those guys, like no one has that lineup. So
right. Just
maybe you're sacrificing too much because like Jordan Noir is just going to play 40 minutes. And if that's the case, like you kind of just need him. So I think it's a tough call. Like this has become a super interesting 3-game slate, but I do think you're right. Like the point guard ownership in general will be pretty spread out. So I do think Trae Young could be like somewhat contrarian. And then Paul George, I still think it's worth targeting him, even if you want to try to make a balanced lineup, because like Butler probably should be the same price as Paul George. If we were just talking like cash games, right? Like those are very similar fantasy output kind of players. But because George is 1,400 more, I think like he's harder to afford. Less people will play him. So if I had to pick one super expensive guy that I really like, this is probably the guy. I think it's George.
Is there anyone you're outright fading tonight?
I don't think so. Like the guy I'm leaning towards the most in that respect is Jalen Brunson. Like Noir is such a good value play that I think basically if you're using him, pair him with more contrarian spend up guys like George or Trae or Lowry, Capella, whatever. Brunson though, like I guess it's more the position that he's at point guard / shooting guard, which like there's so many good choices there that I think it's a large opportunity cost to play him. Shooting guard isn't as strong as point guard, but again, we have Chris Middleton there. Actually Chris Middleton's small forward only, so that does alter things a bit. But for shooting guard, I guess you can play Noir. I maybe need to look at these before I say the names because these are all forwards that I'm mentioning. So maybe that is why Brunson's popular because shooting guard is tough. So that could be, yeah. I think the reason that I was skeptical of Brunson
is so disrespected we don't even have a headshot for him.
Yeah, I should just quickly say on Noir, he put up 60 fantasy points on the last day of the season last year. That's not an exaggeration. He literally went for 60 fantasy points on the final day of last year's regular season.
He probably priced in the 3K range too.
He was exactly 3K was the flat minimum. And he was for people who are interested in this sort of thing, like Noir was the best fantasy play of all time on that slate. And that's not a stretch either. He was 0.01% owned in like the biggest contest, because if people remember, the Bucks had nothing to play for if the Nets won their game earlier in the night, the Nets clinched the 2 seed and then the Bucks were locked into the 3. So because of the way the timing of those games worked out, you didn't know if the Bucks were going to need to play their starters or not until after the game locked, but the Nets were up 20 or so points. So if you made the assumption like, all right, once the Nets game is official, the Bucks will just take all their starters out. And like then you would go to Noir because he is like the go-to garbage time guy on the team. And that is what happened when the Nets finally won. You got the notifications from everywhere, like Giannis scratched, Holiday scratched, Middleton scratched. They all got taken out of the starting lineup, but it was too late for anyone to swap, so no one had Noir. And yeah, I think he went for 62 fantasy points. But yeah, I guess that's my initial reaction to the Jalen Brunson being popular thing is like, why would you play him? Like he doesn't have that much upside. But maybe it's a positional thing because Noir is a forward, Middleton's a forward, Brunson is shooting guard. So like, who else are you playing at shooting guard? Maybe that is the question because like now I'm scanning it and it's a very thin position, perhaps the thinnest position there is tonight.
Well, I would say your top options at shooting guard are, I mean, obviously George Hill we talked about and Jalen Brunson we talked about. I think from there you could look at, Grayson Allen, who had a good, first game of the season. Obviously, it's another value opportunity opened up on the Milwaukee side. Jordan Poole, who was pretty chalky the other night as well. You could look at, if you want to stay with Milwaukee, Pat Connaughton. But I think those are your big ones. That other than that, you're sort of, all right. Do I pay up for Andrew Wiggins? Do I ever trust Luke Kennard? Terrence Mann kind of same situation. So I think it's Hill and Brunson mainly, and then Allen, Connaughton, Poole are probably some other guys you'd consider at that spot.
Yeah, one other thing that we don't know yet is if Lou Williams is going to play or not.
So I was just going to ask you that. What of these potential injuries or questionable status are you watching for in these few games?
So now that we've kind of hashed this out at shooting guard, I think Cam Reddish could become appealing if we don't see Lou Williams on the court. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like Lou doesn't play enough where it would have a major impact on anyone except maybe Cam Reddish. I think that's probably the guy who picks up those extra minutes. But yeah, it's not, there's nothing injury wise that seems super relevant now that we know that Drew Holiday and Brook Lopez aren't playing.
We appreciate everyone hanging here with us. We're with you for about another 20 minutes. Hit the like if you're watching on YouTube and hit the subscribe button for the DraftKings YouTube page as well. If you're watching on Twitch, give us a follow. Twitch.tv/DraftKings. We much appreciate that. And of course, on Twitter, if you're watching on the what used to be called a Periscope feed, I guess. But if you're watching the live Twitter video, give us a comment there, a like, a retweet, all that good stuff. Spread the gospel so we can keep trying to educate you and help you out in terms of lineup building. Get any questions in that you have. Talking a little NBA. We'll make the move to NFL in a matter of moments as well. But I mean, I guess what I will say in terms of, watching things up until lock, like unlike last year, right, Matt, short of some sort of a COVID surprise, which you can never totally rule out. And the times that we're living in, it was much more common. I think last year, now that the vast majority of the league is vaccinated, it's not going to be as much of a daily concern as it was, leading up to lock last year. But we shouldn't have too many of those, oh my God, surprises at, in the case of tonight, 7:00 Eastern or 7:25 Eastern, when you got your 150 lineups all built and spread out, and then something breaks and it's, oh no. And
yeah, you say that,
like
and then in comes whatever news we're about to get hit with, right?
Like, totally fair. I know all of a sudden it'll be the Milwaukee or the Dallas game. Guess what? Jalen Brunson's not playing tonight. Huh? What?
That would shake things up. Like you say that, like, oh, that's, I think to the average person, it's like, why would we care that Jalen Brunson might not play? Like that would be huge. That would be a massive thing.
Yeah, no, it'd be gigantic. But let's talk a little football. As much as maybe we, roll our eyes at Thursday night football sometimes. I mean, this game, this is like the annual Hall of Fame game in Canton that we're looking at tonight here. Denver and Cleveland, a couple of reeling teams. Denver started off 3-0, has dropped the last three, obviously. Cleveland's lost its last couple, doesn't have Baker Mayfield tonight, doesn't have Odell Beckham Jr. tonight, doesn't have Kareem Hunt tonight, doesn't have Nick Chubb tonight. Obviously Teddy Bridgewater's banged up on the other side. We're going to have Case Keenum going here for Cleveland with Mayfield's first absence of his NFL career. It's all of a sudden like Dearness Johnson's world, and we're living in it. Talk about chalky plays tonight. Everyone's going to be all about him this evening. I mean, ownership is going to be nuts. Like, I don't even know what a conservative estimate for Johnson's ownership is going to be in this game. Never mind what he's going to be in that captain slot. What is your overall outlook on this game before we start kind of looking at the key players? I mean, what are we going to get?
Yeah, so if people thought we were rambling a bit trying to cover all this chaos with the NBA slate, just wait till we dive into this football game. It's gonna be, this is one of my favorite showdown slates in recent memory, just because there's so many different options. Like you're not hamstrung salary wise. And you can be pretty confident still, even though there's so many injuries, like we can be pretty confident what most of the field is going to do. Like Johnson costs $4,600 and he's the starting running back in a game where we have a backup quarterback on a team that already likes to run, but they will probably run even more because they're trying to protect. I mean, it'll depend on the score, right? But like you would think the Browns with Case Keenum out there are going to be less happy to pass and more reluctant and want to run the ball more. Maybe Dearness Johnson just doesn't do well, but like $4,600, everyone's going to play this guy. The thing to keep in mind here, though, is that if you play Johnson in the captain slot and you spend all your salary, like you play the two quarterbacks, because you can fit whatever you want if you have him there. Like he's such an unbelievable salary saver for this slate.
Oh yeah.
If you play him in the captain slot, you're probably duplicating with like hundreds of lineups, at least in the largest tournaments.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to find a unique lineup that has him captain.
Right, but at the same time, like there are legitimately good lineups you can make that don't even use anywhere close to all the salary. Because if you imagine a game where Bridgewater and Keenum don't throw the ball very much, and like maybe they both score single-digit fantasy points because they have like one touchdown each and not a lot of yards, like the scores are going to be so low that like the defense that gets 8 points might be one of the 6 best scores. Like you can do weird stuff in this game. So first I'll give my estimate on where Johnson comes in ownership wise. Like I think we're looking at something like 70 to 80%, and 20 to 30 of that is at captain. Which doesn't necessarily mean to fade him though, because you can play him, just don't play him in the same exact combinations that everyone else is.
I guess one thing that I keep coming back to is, this news about, first Chubb goes down, and then Hunt, and then it's will Chubb play, and he's not. And so all of a sudden it becomes Dearness Johnson and Demetric Felton, if I'm saying that right.
I won't know to correct you if you're not.
I believe, and so, the season long people out there, everyone's scurrying to the waiver wire and, can I pick one of these guys up? And we all just kind of collectively as a society decided that Dearness Johnson's the guy. He's the guy. Right. He's the guy. He's your number one back. He's your top option in the backfield. That's the guy. But we decided it. How do we know it's not Felton? How do we know Felton's not that? How do we know that Johnson isn't going to be massively owned tonight like you're talking about, but it ends up being Felton that actually is either the lead back or the guy that gets the majority of the touches, or he's the passing down back out of the backfield, whatever it may be. How do we know Felton's not the guy that has the better night? Is it not the right approach to maybe just roster both of them, given that salary is not really a concern tonight? Use up 2 of your spots there, captain one of them, flex both of them, whatever, and then go with it and just see what happens?
I think you're on the right track with all of that, really, because I think running backs are where the value is tonight. This is going to be the other consideration we have is that it's going to be pretty windy in Cleveland tonight, and there just might be less passing for that reason too. So like this could be a game where we just see run after run after run, and it's a whole bunch of different guys. So it doesn't have to be Johnson. Yeah, it could be Felton. I think playing both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon makes sense.
Yeah.
I do think you can make a lineup with 4 running backs in it. We also John Kelly is another running back who I hadn't heard of until about an hour ago, but he's the third guy in this Browns rotation. Maybe he's the
no guy. Time in my life for John Kelly. I've devoted too much interest in Johnson and Felton. I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, because like if you have to now make lineups that have Kelly too and cover all your bases, like
can't do it.
There aren't enough lineups available. You could play the maximum in every contest and not come up with all the combinations. So yeah, it's too much. But I think like whether you're playing Felton and captain or Johnson, it's so easy to just say, all right, I'll just slam Bridgewater and Keenum in there because I have the salary. I'll play Courtland Sutton. Like, why wouldn't I play those guys if I can afford them? So to me, like the most contrarian thing you can do is spend 37,000 of the salary cap instead of 50 and just play like, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's true. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just with salary being such and I use this comparison all the time. We don't have the Chiefs and the Bucks tonight. We're all, well, do I pay up for for Kelsey? Do I pay up for Godwin? Do I have to have Evans? Do I have to have Hill? Oh, what about the quarterbacks? Is it like Leonard Fournette? Like this is not remotely the reality of tonight's preseason game. I mean, I can't even, short of, again, just differentiation and wanting to win the million, chasing after a big GPP, but certainly if you're in a cash contest, like you don't even hesitate about playing both the quarterbacks, right? Unless you just think that, Keenum hasn't played in so long and Bridgewater's banged up. He's got the multiple injuries that I need to worry about. And you just load up on running backs. You put Cortland Sutton and, maybe Jarvis Landry in there and call it a day. I don't know. It's not going to be a concern. It's not going to, I could put both quarterbacks in there. I could captain Johnson. I could have a very respectable lineup around them with top receivers. I still wouldn't come close to my 50K.
Yeah. But yeah, still for cash lineups, I still think you played. Like, there's an argument that Johnson should be the highest scoring player in this whole game, and he costs half what he actually costs. Like, compared to Teddy Bridgewater, who's 11K, Johnson's 4.6. He's like 30-something% of the cost of Bridgewater. So for cash, yeah, that's just such a massive value. Then you could fit all the other guys. But I legitimately think there's 9 players in this game who have a strong case to be the highest scorer overall. Both quarterbacks, all 4 of the running backs we mentioned. Then I guess it's Sutton, Patrick, and Landry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could play any of those guys at captain.
I
don't think any of them are crazy.
For Noah Fant, I tell you.
I should have included Noah Fant. He's number 10. There are 10 of them. Yeah,
okay, fair enough.
He's on that list. I won't disagree. I just left him out. No, he's definitely one of them too. So not to disrespect Noah Fant, but then like,
well, and I said this to somebody earlier. Would anybody be surprised if Austin Hooper has a touchdown tonight?
Yeah, so those guys are tough, right? Because like between Hooper and Njoku, if they don't score a touchdown, you probably don't want to have them. Like the path for them to have a good game without one is very unlikely. But if they do score, like they can be
end zone dependent.
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to play. It's just
I'm not saying I'd play them, but if you're looking for, differentiation, if you're looking for something that sets you apart from the field, and you're banking on that Keenum to one of those two guys, Njoku or Hooper connection, just because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think about he's not a new quarterback. He's a journeyman who's been around for a long time, but he hasn't played this year, obviously. And he's, it's a new team, new system, bigger picture. You're going in, you have Landry, you don't have Beckham, you don't have your 2 primary running backs that you can lean on. So maybe Johnson, Felton both give you something. Maybe neither one does. Who the heck knows? You're looking for a safety blanket. You're looking for a binky. And a lot of the time for quarterbacks, find me that big short range target. It's your tight end. And so that's what makes me say, okay, like if I just don't think, and I could pull up the odds, but if I'm thinking like, what's a decent long shot anytime touchdown bet for the Browns tonight? Austin Hooper or David Njoku, that could make some sense.
Yeah, I think I'd be this is probably a very obvious take, but if Jarvis Landry weren't playing, I would be way more on board with that. I'm sure the field would be too. The odds would be different, but Landry is such a good short yardage possession receiver, like third down guy, all of those things, that he's the safety blanket primarily, which is probably why I don't think the tight ends are the greatest plays. But we also don't know that Landry is fully healthy. And if he's kind of gimpy and not out there for every snap, any snap he's not on the field, then I'm with you. Like Hooper and Njoku become the guys. Like this we saw Donovan Peoples-Jones have this massive game. And to me, that was like as much of a
guy people are chasing on the waiver wire this week.
He literally scored 60% of his fantasy points on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half. So like the idea that that's going to be something he can replicate, he needed 5 targets. So yeah, I would not be chasing that, but he could catch one deep ball. Although I don't think Case Keenum is as likely to throw the ball downfield as Baker Mayfield was.
Yeah, he doesn't have Steph Diggs. Like it's the Minnesota Miracle days are kind of behind Case Keenum at this stage.
Yeah, that is a good callback. It's going to be interesting to see what they do play calling wise with Keenum, because it would be very surprising to me if they go more pass heavy. Like, because on the one hand, their running backs are out, so you could say like they should pass more. They're missing their running backs, but they're missing their quarterback too. So like, so the point you made about Dearness Johnson and like, do we really know he's the running back? I think that's a really good one. And then on the same note, do we have any idea how the Browns are going to play offense tonight? This is their entire B squad. It's like we have no idea what their play calling is going to be.
Can you justify rostering one or both the defenses, given your concerns about the passing game? And I'm not even talking about who they are, but the wind, obviously, and just not knowing what we're going to get out of the various running backs?
Yeah, I'm much more inclined to just play a handful of running backs together because I do think that the play calling will be very run heavy. And Bridgewater, I think the narrative through 3 weeks was Bridgewater doesn't turn the ball over. That's why he's so great. Turnovers are very random, and we've seen that come back the other way very, very strongly over the last couple of games where Bridgewater's had a ton of turnovers. And I would think, like, especially if the Broncos get an early lead, they just lean on their running backs, especially Javonte Williams, who's looked really good. Not that Melvin Gordon can't have a good game also, but like I think this does project to be a run-heavy game. And I think it won't be sneaky to play one running back on each team because that's like pretty much like it's kind of a given that some number of like there's going to be a large number of rushing attempts in this game. I think everyone knows that. But playing two running backs on each team or at least two on one team, that is not something I think a lot of people are going to do. So I don't even really have a strong opinion between Williams and Gordon. I like both of them a lot. So yeah, defenses, I think you would want a game where the quarterbacks are – that's really where I was getting there is you would want a game where the quarterbacks are going to throw more to give you that defensive upside. Not that I'm saying I hate the defenses by any stretch. It's just I'd rather play contrarian running backs, get different lineup that way, maybe play one defense. But to me, this doesn't seem like a game where we're going to have like a back and forth, a bunch of sacks, a bunch of turnovers. I see this more as a game where they're like the game's going to be over quickly is basically what it is. Like the clock's going to be running the whole time, something like that.
You know, that being said, though, the Teddy Bridgewater got just demolished by the Raiders. I mean, he's hit 17 times. I mean, it's why he's gimping around as things stand right now. But look at this. I mean, the Raiders had multiple sacks, or rather, the Broncos had multiple sacks, but the Raiders also did the. I can't obviously pull up Vegas right here with what its numbers were, but let me see here. I had it.
You click Bridgewater, you should at least be able to see the turnovers, right?
Yeah, I can pull that up. But what I wanted to say was, let me see. So, all right. So Bridgewater hit 17 times, sacked 5, 3 interceptions. And now obviously he's got the foot and quad injuries. So
he had that many picks. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah. Let me see. His game log. Yeah. 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's still at 26 fantasy points despite all the interceptions, but that's obviously because of the touchdowns and he hit the bonus. So
yeah, Teddy Bridgewater will not be throwing 49 times in this game. It would take some really weird stuff for anything resembling that to happen again.
Yeah, especially in the wind and with their opponent on the other side. It's probably going to be an ugly night. You got the Browns favored by 1.5. The over-under set at 40.5. Feels like an under game to me. That being said, we've outlined, like you said, I mean, 10 potential guys that could explode. Is that likely? Of course not. But, any one of them could be the high scorer here tonight. Browns being favored and being at home, obviously that makes a lot of sense. Is there a bet you like in this one?
Yeah, I still think this total's too high. Like, I think there's a weird phenomenon that happens sometimes where when the total has already dropped, and it's the same for a spread too, when the line has moved so much already, I think odds makers will get a bit reluctant to move it more because then, like, for the people who already bet the under initially, they can then hit the over, and now you have like these big middle opportunities. Or maybe it's sentiment from most bettors where they're like, oh, look, the total's dropped 4 points already. There must be value on the over now. Like it's gone too far. But like to me, this game could easily have a score that winds up in the low 30s or even lower if the teams play the way that I kind of expect them to, where there's just not that many pass attempts. Mm-hmm. Normally what you worry about if you have a matchup between two bad teams is that they throw the ball too much. They make mistakes. You get turnovers. You get quick points that way. And I just imagine both teams playing super conservative where that doesn't happen. So like maybe the total should be in the high 30s instead of where it is. What are your thoughts on it? Because like this is a scary number to bet an under at, right? Like it's already so low. How could it go lower? But
right,
if there's no losses, Like it could go much lower.
I just whenever I'm thinking about an over under, I start to think about the potential score, obviously. And it's like, okay, 40.5. So do we see a game that could end, I don't know, let's call it 21-17. Okay, you hit the under. I think that's totally realistic. All of a sudden it's 24-17. It's all right, I'm screwed. I've misjudged this game. So I think it's such a low number to look at to really fall in love with. I get why anybody would, want to hesitate and just have it be a stay away zone. That being said, it's not going to go any lower, right? Like you're not going to see if it were 37.5, like I'd panic. I wouldn't go anywhere close to it. But 45, well, it's way too tempting on the other side. So I don't know, 40.5 sort of feels right. I still feel like it's going to be below, but it's a tough number to gauge.
I do think that's a good point. Like if it were 41.5 instead of 40.5, the under would actually be a lot more appealing, even though that's only 1 point, because 41 is a relatively important number. 27-14, 31-10, like 28-13. There's a lot of ways you get to 41. 40 is not quite as common. And actually 42 is not quite as common, even if you think about it, because like it seems like it should be. 42 is just 6 touchdowns, but most games have field goals. Like you don't always get there. So maybe we've passed the point now where it's like really appealing to bet an under. And if we could have got it at 41.5, that was the way to go. But to me, like you mentioned 37.5, if it were that, you'd be scared. Like I do think that that's more where the fair line should be. Yeah. So like the difference, you don't have a lot of breathing room there. If you're like, I'm betting under 40.5 because I think there should be 38 points scored, one extra field goal or one touchdown that should have been a field goal and you lose. But to me, at least like if you had to bet over under in this game, I think under is still the side.
Our man Bry Guy, Denver 2-4 over under record. Cleveland 4-2 against the spread this year, or 4-2 over under. Pardon me. Games at Cleveland this year have averaged 45 points, which that's just one of those, like you take the number with a grain of salt, because again, like Thursday night football, short turnaround, game in the wind, weather conditions, no Baker Mayfield, you have Case Keenum. Like this is just such an isolated game into itself. Yeah. But
we shouldn't even call them the Cleveland Browns for this game. Like they should have a different team name. This is an entirely different group of players.
Let's see. First time playing Fortnite had asked a little while ago your thoughts on Landry's production tonight. Obviously coming off of IR, hasn't played since week 2 when he got hurt. Was good in week 1, had about 20 fantasy points. Obviously didn't do anything in that week 2 game before he went down. What are your expectations for him?
I think it could go a lot of ways. I think one thing that is almost certain is that maybe his ownership won't be low, but there will be some percentage of people that are scared to play him because of this narrative. We saw AJ Brown, I think, come in somewhere in the 20s, even though he wasn't that expensive for the last showdown for Titans Bills. And I think this happens a lot where you have an injury situation, people aren't sure, they haven't seen the guy play in a while. And it's like, what if he's not healthy? I don't want to get screwed by that. So that could be the situation. Like he could look normal and put up 15 points and have a bunch of targets, or maybe he doesn't play his full allotment of snaps and it's just, you're not going to know, but I do think it's worth taking a shot on him in GPPs because I think a lot of people will be scared off.
Rams boy in the chat here. Final score 28-9 Browns. Would still hit the under. I don't think it's going to be that lopsided. That would surprise me.
Yeah, that's a hell of a score. The Browns are going to score 4 touchdowns in this game. I would like to know how that happens.
And they're all going to be by Felton. Just you watch.
Can you imagine Felton goes for like
Felton's getting the Bundy tonight?
Yeah. I mean, right, I'm confident Ernest Johnson will start, but yeah, we'll see.
We're getting out. It's no time to really talk about this, but we've got game 5, Atlanta up 3-1 on the Dodgers to the Braves. Close it out tonight. Your quick thought.
Don't think so, but I think the Braves do win the series, just not tonight.
Good to see Joe Kelly returning to his starting roots as everybody goes by way of the Tampa Bay Rays. Thank you very much, obviously, to Bry Guy, to Amon, our producer, and all of you out there in the chat for tuning in. Who needs Reed? Kidding, we love you, buddy. But Matt Meiselman, excellent stuff today. Great working with you. Let's do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime Reed wants to not come on a Thursday, I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Remember, Slate comes your way Monday through Friday, right around 5 o'clock Eastern. That means we'll be back with you tomorrow. See you then.